On November 24, 1971, a Northwest Orient Airlines flight departed from Portland, America. It was a short 30-minute journey to Seattle, with only 36 passengers and 6 crew members on board. None of them knew that among them was a hijacker, a man who would become infamous as D.B Cooper. Dressed in a business suit with a white shirt and black pants, Cooper appeared like any other businessman. He was likely in his mid-40s and had deliberately chosen a seat at the back of the plane, seat 18E. Shortly after takeoff, he introduced himself to an air hostess named Florence Schaffner. With a pleasant smile, he handed her a note. Schaffner, a 23-year-old flight attendant, assumed he was flirting and casually tucked the note away without reading it. Noticing this, Cooper leaned toward her and quietly insisted that she read it. His next words were chilling. He had a bomb. Startled, Schaffner unfolded the note. Written neatly, it read, "Miss, I have a bomb in my briefcase, and I want you to sit beside me." Though shaken, she obeyed and took the seat next to him. But she still doubted whether he was serious. To erase any uncertainty, Cooper opened his briefcase, revealing red cylinders, wires, and a large cylindrical battery. It was unmistakably a bomb. Cooper quickly made his demands to the air hostess. He wanted $200,000 in cash to be delivered by 5 p.m. that same day. Along with the money, he requested 2 parachutes in the back and 2 in the front of the plane. Upon landing, he insisted that a fuel truck be ready to refuel the aircraft. He warned her against attempting anything suspicious, threatening to blow up the plane if she did. The other passengers remained oblivious to the situation, and Schaffner was determined to keep it that way. She discreetly entered the cockpit, where she showed the pilots the note Cooper had given her. Another air hostess, Tina Mucklow, was informed of the situation and seated next to Cooper. With the help of Schaffner and Mucklow, communication between Cooper and the cockpit was maintained. The pilots immediately informed the air traffic controller, and soon the news reached Donald Nyrob, the president of the airline. Nyrob, as the decision-maker, made a surprising call. He instructed the staff to comply fully with Cooper's demands. After coordinating with the FBI, he contacted a Seattle bank to arrange the cash. The bank had a large emergency fund set aside for such situations. You might wonder why the president of the airline decided to cooperate with a hijacker. The reason was simple: reputation. Nyrob was determined to keep the hijacking quiet and avoid widespread publicity that could severely damage the airline's image and business. In order to keep the incident from making global headlines, he was willing to meet all of Cooper's demands. There was just one problem. The money needed time to be gathered, but the flight was originally meant to last only minutes. To buy time, the pilots were instructed to keep circling over Seattle instead of landing. What was supposed to be a short flight stretched into 3 hours. The passengers remained completely unaware. To prevent panic, the pilots announced that a minor technical issue was causing the delay. The explanation seemed believable, and no one suspected anything unusual. Finally, at 5:46 p.m., the plane landed at Seattle's airport. An airline representative approached, carrying a bag filled with cash and the 4 parachutes Cooper had requested. Once his demands were met, Cooper released the passengers and flight attendants, except for Tina Mucklow. As planned, the aircraft was refueled, and soon after, it took off again. This time, only Cooper, Mucklow, and the pilots remained on board. With Tina Mucklow still on board, Cooper resumed giving precise instructions to the pilots. He dictated the flight's new destination, speed, and even the angle of the aircraft. He ordered them to head toward Mexico City, maintaining an altitude of 10,000 feet with the wings set at a 15-degree angle. Additionally, he insisted that the plane fly as slowly as possible. The pilots hesitated, explaining that with these settings, the plane wouldn't have enough fuel to reach Mexico City. But Cooper was unfazed. He simply instructed them to follow his commands. What happened next was nothing short of extraordinary, straight out of a movie. Cooper turned to Tina and told her to go into the cockpit and lock the door behind her. Now, he was alone in the main cabin. He calmly took out his parachutes and prepared for the jump. Moments later, a warning light flashed in the cockpit, signaling that the rear staircase had been deployed. At the time, Boeing 727 aircraft had a unique feature: an aft staircase at the back of the plane. Photographs from the investigation show how the rear staircase of the Boeing 727 extended downward from the back of the plane. Cooper deployed these stairs and, with the parachutes and the money, made his daring jump into the night. The pilots and flight attendants had no way of witnessing this. Locked inside the cockpit, they were unaware of what was happening in the main cabin. At the time, cockpit doors had no peepholes or windows to see outside. However, at exactly 8:13 p.m., the pilots noticed a sudden shift. The rear of the plane abruptly tilted upward. They had to quickly recalibrate and stabilize the aircraft. Following this, they continued flying toward Nevada, eventually landing in Reno. Authorities were immediately alerted, and a thorough investigation of the plane began. But there was no sign of Cooper. He had vanished without a trace. The only clues left behind were a tie with a clip, torn pieces of parachutes, likely used to wrap the bag of money, and a few personal items, including cigarette butts from the ones Cooper had smoked during the flight. Smoking was permitted on planes back then. Investigators meticulously examined the scene, uncovering 66 unidentified fingerprints, none of which matched the crew or passengers. However, the suitcase that allegedly contained the bomb, the parachutes, and the cash had disappeared, just like Cooper. From that day forward, the FBI launched an extensive investigation to track down Cooper. But despite decades of effort, not a single trace of him was ever found. The case remained open for 45 years before it was officially closed in 2016, yet many questions remain unanswered. This is the only hijacking in history that has never been solved, making it one of the FBI's greatest mysteries. Who was Cooper? What happened to him? Was the stolen money ever recovered? The case is filled with unanswered questions, and to this day, the truth remains elusive. There are two particularly fascinating aspects of this incident. First, throughout the entire hijacking, the passengers had no idea their plane had been taken over. No one was harmed, no lives were lost, and there was no violence involved. Many credit this to Tina Mucklow, calling her the unsung hero of the hijacking. She played a key role in keeping Cooper calm, ensuring his demands were met, and preventing panic, avoiding any situation that could have led to chaos or injuries. The plane's co-pilot, William Ratzak, later praised her, saying, "She was so calm, cool, and collected, I couldn't think of anyone better to have sitting next to someone who would do a criminal act like this." The second intriguing detail is the name D.B Cooper. As mentioned earlier, the hijacker introduced himself as Dan Cooper. Yet, over time, the case became widely known as the mystery of D.B Cooper. The FBI's initial investigation revealed that when Cooper jumped from the plane, he had the stolen cash strapped to his body. The money weighed around 10 kilograms, making his descent even more challenging. He used two parachutes, one attached to his front and the other on his back, for the jump. Authorities had a general idea of the area where Cooper landed, the rugged southwest region of Washington state. This was a treacherous landscape filled with dense pine forests, deep lakes, and steep canyons. It was also home to wild animals, including bears. Given these conditions, investigators initially concluded that Cooper had little to no chance of survival. Jumping from 10,000 feet in complete darkness at 8 p.m., the sky was pitch black, was already dangerous. But Cooper's attire made it even worse. He was dressed in a business suit, unsuitable for skydiving, especially in the freezing, rainy weather that night. At an altitude of feet, thick black clouds would have completely obscured his vision. Wind speed was another major concern. Experts estimated that when Cooper leaped from the aircraft, he was traveling at around km/h. The United States Parachute Association pointed out an additional problem: the cold water. November temperatures in that region were brutally low. If Cooper had landed in a lake, survival would have been nearly impossible. The icy water could have triggered hypothermia within minutes, and with the weight of the cash strapped to him, swimming to safety would have been incredibly difficult. Yet, despite all these challenges, later findings suggested that Cooper might have actually survived. One key detail stood out. When Tina Mucklow handed Cooper the parachutes, they came with instructional guides. But Cooper told her he didn't need them. He already knew how to use the parachutes. This indicated that he had prior skydiving experience, leading the FBI to reconsider the possibility that he had made it out alive. Their next step was to search the area where Cooper was believed to have landed. In fact, police had already started combing through the wilderness the day after the hijacking. They were looking for any sign of him: a body, a torn parachute, or even a stray $20 bill. As mentioned earlier, the cash given to Cooper was unique. The $200,000 ransom consisted entirely of $20 bills, 10,000 notes in total. To track the money, the FBI had recorded every serial number before handing it over. They distributed this list nationwide, instructing banks, casinos, and businesses to report any matching bills. But tracking Cooper down was proving increasingly difficult. The vast, unforgiving wilderness offered endless places to hide. The biggest challenge investigators faced was determining the exact area where he had landed. Where should they even begin the search? There were countless variables at play. What was the wind speed when the plane was in flight? How dark was it at the moment of the jump? What was the aircraft's exact location when Cooper leaped? At what altitude did he deploy his parachute? And in which direction could the wind have carried him? Investigators estimated that Cooper likely landed somewhere near Lake Merwin in Washington state. To test their theory, the FBI conducted a practical experiment. They flew the same aircraft under identical conditions and pushed a 91-kilogram sled out of the rear staircase. By tracking where the sled landed, they hoped to determine Cooper's possible landing zone. This led to an extensive search operation. Law enforcement carried out door-to-door investigations, knocking on the doors of local farmhouses and questioning residents. Patrol boats scoured both Lake Merwin and nearby Lake Yale, searching for any trace of Cooper. A private company even deployed a submarine to explore the depths of Lake Merwin, diving as far as 200 feet below the surface. Despite these efforts, they found nothing. No parachute, no money, no body. As the investigation dragged on, the FBI took another approach. They published the serial numbers of the ransom bills in local newspapers, hoping to track the money's movement. To incentivize the public, they announced a $1,000 reward for the first person to turn in one of the marked bills. The offer stood for 3 years. Yet, not a single bill ever surfaced. 8 years had passed since the hijacking when a surprising lead emerged. A pilot named Tom Bohan, who worked for Continental Airlines, contacted the FBI with new information. On the night of the hijacking, Bohan had been flying another aircraft just 4,000 feet above and 4 minutes behind Cooper's plane. He vividly recalled the intensity of the storm that night, calling it one of the worst he had ever encountered in his career. Based on his first-hand experience, Bohan believed the FBI's calculations regarding Cooper's drop zone were significantly off by nearly 80 degrees. He suggested they should be searching near the drainage area of the Washougal River instead. A few months later, his theory gained unexpected validation. An 8-year-old boy, while digging on the banks of the Columbia River, stumbled upon several $20 bills. Some of the notes were still bundled together with rubber bands. News quickly spread. Hijacker D.B Cooper, the first break in the only unsolved airplane hijacking in U.S. history, came on a Columbia River beach. An 8-year-old boy dug up the shreds of $3,000 on Sunday. Authorities wasted no time verifying the bills. When they checked the serial numbers, their suspicions were confirmed. This was part of the ransom money given to Cooper years ago. Another major question remains. Regardless of what happened to Cooper after he jumped, who was he? The mystery remains unsolved to this day. No one truly knows what happened that night or who Cooper really was.